MSW Media.
Welcome to Teacher Quit Talk. I'm Miss Redacted.
And I'm Mrs. Frazzled. Every week we explore the teacher exodus to find out what, if anything, could get these educators back in the classroom.
We've all had our moments where we thought, what the hell am I doing here? From burnout to bureaucracy to soul-sucking stressors and creative dead ends.
From recognizing when it was time to go to navigating feelings of guilt and regret afterwards, we're here to cut out the gaslighting and get real about what it means to leave teaching.
We've got insights from former teachers from all over the country who have seen it all. So get ready to be disturbed. Join us on Teacher Quit Talk to laugh through the pain of the U.S. education system. We'll see you there.
The rule of law is not just some lawyer's turn of phrase. It is the very foundation of our democracy. The essence of the rule of law is that like cases are treated alike. That there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for the powerful, another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity. To serve as Attorney General at this critical time is a calling I am honored and eager to answer.
So yeah, now it's clean up on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be clean up on aisle 45.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 50 of Cleanup on Aisle 45. This is our last episode of 2021, and technically, Andrew, I'm on vacation, but we decided I couldn't skip the 50th.
No.
And the final episode of the year. So I am Allison Gill, and with me as always is Andrew Torrez. Hey, Andrew.
Hi, Allison. Hope you're having a lovely holiday so far, and we will get you back to your vacation, undisclosed location, sipping Mai Tais and with her feet up on the beach. I hope anyway.
Well, we can pretend. We can pretend.
There you go. It's the season for pretending. So, in any event, it has been quite a year for the show. We're 50 episodes in. It's been quite a year in general. And before we get to recapping some of those stories, I just want to give a shout out to our last new patrons of the year. That is Ride to Vote, In the Interim, Thomas Pike, Sean Noonan, and Jacob Morrison. Thank you so much for supporting the show. And again, you want to support the show in the new year, right? Like you get flushed with some of that Christmas cash or, whatever it is you got along the holidays. You can give some of that to us for as little as $1 an episode over at patreon.com/aisle45pod, AISLE45POD.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some of the big moments this year. And the first thing that comes to the top of my head, Andrew, when we talk about cleanup on aisle 45 are some of the court filings. There's been some amazing rulings and findings from judges and some absolutely ridiculous filings from some people in Trump world. And it's gotten really weird. And, I don't have the years of experience that you do reading court filings. I'm pretty new to this in the last 4 or 5 years or so. But I have to say that even in my small time of reading court filings, there was just some absolutely ridiculous stuff. Top of mind is our episode that we did live in DC after we were following the Kraken Strike Force sanctions hearings in Michigan with Judge Parker and Fink for the city of Detroit. And then, of course, the 11 or 12 Kraken attorneys who had all and any kinds of excuses to not be part of whatever Sidney Powell was putting down.
Emily, it's my first day, Newman. That she's my personal favorite. By the way, that's a total lie, right? Like I think we've debunked that on this show that she has participated in multiple of these Kraken lawsuits, has been involved in team big lie from the very beginning. I'm really glad that you flagged this as sort of your first story, because a thing happened beginning in November of 2020 that isn't supposed to happen, right? And it isn't supposed to happen on a lot of different levels, and that is lawyers who are themselves part of the true believer QAnon insanity movement, that we're lumping together as all part of the Kraken lawyers, the titular head being Sidney Powell, got together and put outright falsehoods into court pleadings. And I have to say, like, this is kind of a roller coaster of emotions for me, because I'm used to litigating against the other side. I worked for and had the opportunity, I think I've said this before, to be, as a very, 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 very young lawyer, on the Bush v. Gore 2000 emergency response team that was sent out to Florida. But
you must have been like 10 years old.
Yeah, but thank you so much. But it would have been on the Bush side, right? And so I told my supervising senior partner at the time, Bobby Birchfield, no, I wish you all of the lack of luck in the world, and and I hope you lose down there. Sadly, they did not. But when I look back at those filings, right, when I look back at that kind of participation, that they didn't lie, right? Like, Ted Olson didn't sign on to a brief that said, George W. Bush actually won New York by 10 million votes.
Right.
And
or we didn't have these filings that said, Ruby and her daughter had trucked in boxes of, unsubstantiated fake ballots, and, had people testify in quote unquote legislative hearings of Rudy Giuliani, which, by the way, by the end of the year, ended up with those two election workers suing quite a few people in civil court.
Yeah. And so, we often talk about this, and when I'm talking about kind of the difference between a motion to dismiss and a motion for summary judgment, right? And I will say, right, Allison, if I sue you for intentional infliction of emotional distress, and I say it's because you frowned at me, you get to move to dismiss the case, because even if you did frown at me, which you never have, as far as I know, but that doesn't qualify legally as extreme and outrageous conduct of the sort that you need, right? So you can say, look, man, I never frowned at you, but it doesn't matter. Assume I did. That still doesn't give rise to your cause of action. That's a motion to dismiss. But what I always use as an example for what would survive a motion to dismiss is I say, Allison, you came out and snuck around my house and trespassed onto my property. And if your defense is, dude, I wasn't even there, that doesn't get dismissed out, right? Like, we get to litigate that fact. I say, yes, you do. You say, no, I didn't. And the reason that I'm going through that example is because our courts are incredibly ill prepared to handle outright lies in pleadings, right? We are prepared to give plaintiffs the benefit of the doubt when they say, on information and belief, Allison Gill snuck onto my property and traipsed around my garage and peeked in my windows, and I'm suing her for trespass. The court generally is like, yeah, he might be wrong, but let's give him his day in court and let him prove those facts. And so what you had was this group of Kraken lawyers, a stunning 1-63 record in court, which is mathematically about as bad as you can do. The one case that they won was in Pennsylvania, was in connection with the count, and basically, they got an order allowing Trump supporters to come in and sneeze on volunteers who were in the various Philadelphia precincts. It was a terrible order, but like, that's it. That's what they won. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court had initially said you have to keep 25 feet back due to COVID, and then on appeal they won. Okay, well, you can be within 6 feet. So
yep.
That's it. That's their big win, which, by the way, resulted in no new votes to Donald Trump. The other 63 losses were all involving claims of election fraud, and the reason that they fall into the "they frowned at me" camp is because in many of these cases, there was not even a valid inference to be drawn, right? Like the affidavits that would be attached, and this is kind of the level of laundering, right? Like, so Howard Kleinhendler would attach an affidavit from Spider, and Spider would say, I interviewed these 6 people, and, Linda Liu said that she saw a big white van and people were stuffing ballots and, what looked like big sealed envelopes into her, and it drove through, the gate in the middle of the night in Arizona. And part of what I know I've been taking a long time on this, but part of what was so delightful, and the reason we spent 2 hours breaking down that sanctions hearing, was that Judge Parker really took the time not just to read all of this nonsense, and God bless her, like my eyes start going cross-eyed when I see Terpsichore and Spider and all that nonsense, but also to kind of parse out the inherent weaknesses, the you shouldn't have filed this in the first place. And she made every single lawyer sit on that call and grilled each and every one of them of, hey, did you file this affidavit? Did you review any of the underlying documents? No. Why didn't you? Why did you then sign off and say you reviewed all the documents? Stop passing the buck.
Did you interview any of the people?
Yep.
Did you interview any of the people said they interviewed?
Yeah.
Did you do any due diligence to find out if there was anything to this? Oh, and by the way, did you know that this affidavit showed up in another lawsuit that was laughed out of court where the judge said it was absolutely ridiculous, yet you still copied and pasted it into this lawsuit? Yeah, did any of that happen?
Did you notice this one, which refers to a county that does not exist in the state of Michigan? Yeah. And look, I just want to emphasize, as I kind of bring my evaluation of that to a close. This was bad faith actors tried to break our legal system, and our legal system pushed back. And I've been watching and reading nonsense Sidney Powell lawsuits, and they are the kind that make me embarrassed to admit I'm a lawyer at cocktail parties. Not that anybody's going to cocktail parties anymore, but online, right? And this really, Judge Parker sort of single-handedly, it's not all the way restored. We got a lot of issues still out there. The state bars have not yet disbarred Sidney Powell. We know Defending the Republic, that's her sham nonsense organization, is fundraising on the basis of this. So, that bad guys, are still going to grift and are still getting rich. But the fact that they were not able to use the weaknesses in the legal system that are there, the fact that they got called out for it, that they lost time and time again, and courts did the work. Trump appointees in many cases, George W. Bush appointees, rock solid, rock ribbed Republican judges said, get out of here with this Terpsichore shit. That really, really, made my year, helped restore some faith in the profession.
Yeah, it was actually started to get entertaining, but like reading these for fun, these replies from Judge Parker. But so how it started, how it's going, how it started, 64 frivolous lawsuits, a 1-in-63 record, and how it's going is not only is Sidney Powell and Defending the Republic, the pair of PACs, under criminal federal investigation by a DC federal grand jury at the DC U.S. Attorney's Office, but so are anyone who was involved with that and the fundraising. They're looking into fraud, defrauding donors by lying to them to raise $14 million. How the money was spent, they're looking at the fact that she actually spent some of the money defending herself in Dominion lawsuits, which is illegal. Then she's also, they only found one instance of her actually spending the money on anything she said she was going to spend the money on, which was, any of these election lawsuits. And then finally, we have Michael Flynn submitting his filing for a restraining order saying, hey, I'm really scared because of criminal investigations into Sidney Powell, and I was involved in that. And, I'm also a little bit of, worried about some other stuff that the committee is looking into. I don't think they should have my phone records, and having that be immediately dismissed, and not on the merits, just the fact that when you file for a restraining order, you first of all have to inform the people you're filing against before you file it. And then you also have to show how you would be injured or harmed. And neither of those two elements of getting a restraining order were met. So the judge, a G.W. Bush appointee, at first it was a Trump appointee who recused immediately within an hour. And we don't know why she recused. She just said, she was a Trump appointee, she's recusing. I don't know if it's because she was a Trump appointee. That's not usually why you recuse, or maybe because she was at Jones Day and there was some sort of a connection with Flynn. And of course, then within 24 hours, it was handed to a G.W. Bush appointee named Scriven, and she's the one who dismissed it. But, Flynn is also extremely worried about the fact that Sidney Powell, who he worked with on her PACs defending the Republic, was her lawyer when he threw out his plea agreement, blew that up after pleading guilty twice, and then started this performative BS in the Mueller investigation. So he really doesn't want to be looked at legally, but he doesn't have a leg to stand on. So that's where it started, and that's where we are. And I think that Sidney Powell is probably ripe for criminal indictment.
I concur 100% with respect to that, and I think that the real key there is, do we keep these idiots, grifters, and con artists out of the levers of power? Right? They get back in, all bets are off. And look, we saw that. Like, I'm glad you pointed out, among the myriad of conflicts of interest there is Sidney Powell representing Michael Flynn in connection with the Mueller investigation, in connection with his plea deal. It is, allow me, I've not prepared the appropriate analogy for this, but firing Covington and Burling, my first firm, and Rob Kellner, not a close friend, but a friend of mine, right? One of the very, very best in the business at what he does, and a team of lawyers who are there to law the shit out of, your plea deal. Like, you cannot do better than having Covington and Burling defending you, and replacing them with the clown car that is Sidney Powell, who came in and every filing was a jumble of nonsense that resulted in the court saying, you have asserted this false thing 3 times in connection with just reviewing the plea deal in and of itself, requiring her to show up and at routine status conferences, asking questions like, counsel, you're not suggesting that your client didn't plead voluntarily, are you? And having her say, oh, no, we're not suggesting that. And then go right back to making the same arguments in her, cut and paste motions that were there. The only reason you do that, right? The only reason you replace the A team with the Z team is if you know the fix is in. And then we watched the fix be in, right? We watched all the line prosecutors resign. We watched Bill Barr, send his handpicked lackey in there and demand that the charges be dropped against Michael Flynn. And again, we saw the judiciary as an institution fight back and go, typically we defer. In every case I could possibly imagine, we defer when prosecutors say we're going to drop the case. But this one smells, and we're not going to do it. And so that's not a 2021 story, but it was just.
But it is though, because in his filing that last week,
yep,
he says he can't be subpoenaed, or he shouldn't be bothered with the January 6th committee because he would incriminate himself based on his connection to Sidney Powell. 2 connections now with the PAC, and that she was his attorney after he blew up his plea deal, which, by the way, had he just stuck with, he wouldn't have gone to jail probably, maybe 2 weeks or 30 days, 60 days. And even if he did get the max, he'd be out by now. So it's just, it's stunning.
No, it's about sticking it to us. Yeah.
Yeah. And about doing what Trump wants you to do with regards to, like, let's say what's happening with the 1-6 committee now. He's only happy with how Bannon has responded. He's mad at Roger Stone for pleading the fifth. He's mad at Mark Meadows for handing over 9,000 documents before deciding to stop cooperating after he probably got a phone call. Bannon so far is the only way to handle the 1-6 committee, which is just not even show up for your arraignment, to F you, fine, put me in jail for 30 or 60 days or whatever. See you next July. Peace out.
Well, and I think that's a great pivot to what I think of as the biggest moment of 2021 so far. That is the 1-6 insurrection. You and I were texting as that was unfolding in real time. It was just a moment that I hadn't experienced in this country as an American since 9/11, right? It was just, what's happening right here. And the subsequent response, right? Which was the immediate, the way in which piecing together the story of 1-6 was interwoven with the second impeachment, and the formation of and the work that is being done by the January 6th committee. You can call this a glass half full, glass half empty, and I think we're going to kind of break down, the pluses and the minuses. I know a lot of folks are, disappointed we do not have top line indictments referral. The 1-6 committee House committee cannot issue indictments, can make criminal referrals over to the DOJ. And as far as we know, other than for contempt for witnesses who have not shown up, it has made no such referrals over to the DOJ. And I think that's probably, although that's an inference, I think that inference is probably correct. I think it's, we're at a way too early stage. So if I was going to be the pessimist, I would say, Allison, we had an armed insurrection on American soil in which lunatics spreading the big lie breached the Capitol, the floor of the Senate. They were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." They broke into Nancy Pelosi's office. They stole a laptop. Individuals were killed, were hurt, were injured. It was a nightmare and a disaster. And right now, we've had a couple of 3 and 4 year sentences for people like the QAnon shaman, but we're no closer to kind of putting together how this happened and what happened. Am I wrong to be? That's the pessimist voice. Am I wrong to have that voice?
I think but it's only been in the last month or so that the January 6th committee has started dropping information to us, such as there was a call. And a lot of this has come from really like the intrepid reporting of Hugo Lowell and Jamie Gangel and people close to the committee who are like, no, they're looking into the call to the Willard Hotel from the White House on January 5th. They're looking into January 5th, the war room at the Willard. They're looking into these things. They're looking into connecting, as Jamie Raskin said, the intersection of the violent attack on the Capitol and the soft coup trying to get Pence to throw out electors. And if that was coordinated. And so things that we all saw with our eyes on January 6th and we're able to infer because we're not stupid are now, the evidence has been gathered and is continuing to be gathered. And we're only just now learning about it here at the end, almost a year later, at the end of the road. And if it is in fact true that the Department of Justice is doing the pyramid of guilt and started with the lady standing outside of the rotunda and has worked their way up to Oath Keepers and leaders of Oath Keepers, and then trying to work their way up to the funders and the rally and stuff like that. I'm talking about the DOJ here. And we know they've gotten as far as Sidney Powell and fundraising and her participation in the big lie, which to me leads to some of the the coup PowerPoint and the coup emails and things like that, and starting to look at members of Congress. We haven't heard about anything above that, about anything at the White House or the Department of Justice, or and former Department of Justice officials. But what we do know is that the Inspector General of the Department of Justice is investigating the Department of Justice part, the Jeffrey Clark and the Donahue and Rose and stuff. And we know that the committee is looking at the rest of everything else, and that it is quite possible, if not probable, that the Department of Justice is insulating itself from politicization by waiting for referrals from either the nonpartisan Inspector General or the bipartisan January 6th committee. And that's perhaps when they decide to start looking into the Trump stuff. We don't know. It seems like with the language of Liz Cheney and the committee talking about criminally obstructing an official proceeding, 18 U.S. Code 1512C2, that they are, and they have said they're going to look to make criminal referrals about this inaction or action to corruptly impede the electoral vote count. But, you know, and perhaps that's why the committee is doing that, because they are, you know, and Adam Schiff has said, you know, I don't see the Department of Justice looking into Trump stuff yet, so we're going to make a criminal referral in case they're not. Doesn't mean they aren't, but we haven't heard hide nor hair of it. And it is my pessimist glass half empty. Why are we a year in? I mean, we know with the delay, the Republican delay of the formation of the committee on January 6th, we know about that. We know about the delay of Biden appointed U.S. attorneys finally getting there in DC, in I think October 10th is when that guy got there, or no, November 4th.
Yeah.
Excuse me, October 10th was Southern District. So, you know, that I think is and you know, when I had that discussion with Peter Strzok about like, hey, you don't have to come out and tell me what you're investigating and who you're investigating, but could you come out and tell me what resources you're putting on this, and that you have a sense of urgency and that it's fucking important? Like, just could you let me know that you know that it's important and we know it's important?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at with this. And I am hoping beyond hoping of hopes that with a criminal referral from the Inspector General or the January 6th committee, that a special counsel is appointed who can spend all of their time on this and have a big team with huge resources. And, you know, when after Mueller was appointed, he started raining indictments after 5 months. And so that's what I'm hoping, because, and the reason that I want a special counsel for several reasons, but the main reason is because I want declinations. If you refuse to prosecute somebody you've investigated, you special counsel is required to report to Congress who they investigated, who they decided to prosecute, who they did not decide to prosecute, and why they decided not to prosecute. Because if you just don't do it and don't tell us, that is going to create a huge problem with public perception of the department.
I am really, really glad that you concluded with the declination decisions. I think that's the key kind of takeaway from that, is that, as you point out, right, there's not a bit of, right, this is a black box problem. We do not have the information, right, in the Donald Rumsfeld line, right, like we're at unknown unknowns territory, right? We don't even know what we do not know, and part of the way that this reaches any kind of satisfactory conclusion is when that information comes out to us in the public, and a decision of, hey, we looked here and decided not to proceed against John Eastman, decided not to proceed against,
Jeffrey Clark.
Yeah, Jeffrey Clark would be a fantastic example. Mark Meadows, right? Whatever. That will help us calibrate our anger.
They did it with Mueller when he came out, and everybody was pissed that he didn't say that Trump obstructed justice, and that's my whole next thing, by the way, obstruction of justice stuff. But he wouldn't say. But he explained, hey, look, in the Constitution, the accused has the right to face their accuser and defend themselves. But because of the OLC memo, I can't indict him. He therefore would be stripped of his constitutional right to face his accuser if I accused him of obstruction of justice, because he wouldn't have a chance to face me in court. And so therefore it would be unconstitutional for me to say that he obstructed justice, to draw that conclusion, because he wouldn't have his right to face his accuser in court. And so that's why we didn't do it. And we didn't do it because of the OLC memo. And then I didn't accuse him of it because of this. Now, of course, that left a giant fucking door for Bill Barr to park a truck in. But he at least explained it, so that if people say, why didn't he do that? I can say, well, here's why he said he didn't do it. And so those are the kind of declinations that I want, if there are declinations from the Justice Department. And Senator Whitehouse or Blumenthal, I think it was Whitehouse, when he was questioning Garland in November in front of his committee. And he said, hey, all right, because that's when he was like, are you following the money? Are you using that? And Merrick Garland was like, I promise we're using investigative techniques that you know about, probably you don't know about.
That was a notable interview. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
But then he also said, can you commit to, if you decide not to prosecute Trump for the insurrection, can you commit to explaining your declination to do so? And of course, Merrick Garland was like, I can't really talk about ongoing investigations or whether they're there or not, same stuff. He wouldn't commit to that. And I was like, that is why I want a special counsel.
I agree 100%. And I think, you sort of floated what I think would make a good next topic, and I'll broaden it a little bit. I think it is fair to say that you and I were both surprised and pleased that Donald Trump did not issue any last-minute pardons to himself.
Yes, I thought for sure he was going to give it a shot.
So did I, and so in connection with that, I have to say it is a disappointment, right? And I'm going to lump three things all together in the disappointment category. Number one, we have no obstruction charges against Donald Trump. We have no charges of any kind coming out of the DOJ a year out of the Trump administration. Number two, we do not have the New York Attorney General, New York State indictments into Donald Trump, presumably in connection with his inflated real estate deals. And that is after, attempting to put the squeeze on Alan Weisselberg, and, maybe he's jerked various prosecutors around. We can kind of talk about that and break that down. And number three, the crime we all heard on tape, then President Trump calling up Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State in Georgia, and saying, I don't care, what the totals are, just find me 11,710 votes, okay? Just find the votes, which is, I mean, a textbook example of how to commit a crime on tape. We know that the Atlanta DA has been looking into charges for a long time, but I plead a lot of patience. But I will tell you, I kind of wrap all of that together, and I think this is affecting what I would describe as sort of a widespread progressive level of disaffectedness with the Biden administration, right? That certainly politically, the screw ups on Build Back Better and Joe Manchin and voting rights and everything else don't help. But I get the sense, people aren't saying this, but I get the sense that that's compounded, right? That the reason that it's especially frustrating is because also it feels like the bad guys got off scot-free, right? We're a year out and nothing has happened to any of these scumbags and villains. And I know I want to give voice to that, right? Like, part of why I worked hard for Joe Biden does not inspire, right? Like, part of the reason I worked hard for Joe Biden, that, you and I worked hard to keep the Senate in Democratic hands in the Georgia runoffs, was a sense of a break from the past, which we have gotten, a return to sanity and grown-ups in the White House, which we have gotten, but also it's time, to hold evildoers accountable. And it feels like we haven't done that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, we haven't, and it's quite frustrating. I now send a weekly tweet to the Department of Justice and the DC, our brand spanking new DC U.S. attorney, saying, hey, it's time to charge for obstruction of justice. You've got the follow-up McGahn testimony in May, that happened in May. Okay. You've got volume 2 of the Mueller report. Now, I understand, and this is kind of one of the lessons of the Bannon indictment for contempt. Everyone was like, it should happen immediately. The evidence is all there. Everything should happen immediately. And what the Justice Department did, and they did this silently, nobody knew this was going on, is they took about a little over 3 weeks, maybe exactly 3 weeks. They interviewed witnesses in the grand jury. They got submitted to them interviews from FBI law enforcement. They had over 1,000 pages of evidence and 65 documents, and they put that all together and prepared for whatever defense could have come out of Bannon, which isn't much because he wasn't even part of the government. And then they put together an airtight case for criminal contempt, 2 misdemeanor charges. And so it wasn't as simple as we thought, right?
Yep.
And so the only thing I can hope is that with finally getting the McGahn testimony again, and the transcript of that in May, and all he did, by the way, was just say, yeah, all that stuff I said is right.
Yep.
That's what happened. Yep, I confirm all that stuff. The only thing I can hope is that if Bannon, simple, open and shut, easy ass prosecution took 3 weeks, then maybe 3 or 4 counts of criminal obstruction of justice of a former president might take 5 months, but it just seems like a long ass time. And I don't see them waiting for the U.S. attorney to get there in November to begin.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And let's add 2 more deadlines on top of this, right? The first are statutes of limitation. That's a super complex discussion because it is not clear when statutes begin to run. They typically run from the discovery of the wrong. But for example, for things like conspiracy, the statute does not run until continues to get pushed forward while the conspiracy is ongoing, right? So I don't mean to suggest that you can just do a simple calculation, but I also do mean to suggest that that there's a time limit, that there is a clock that is running.
There is, and the first obstruction stuff is the Flynn stuff.
Yep.
In February, which Mueller didn't seem to have all 3 elements met in his volume 2.
Yep.
Until Donald Trump went on television a couple of weeks ago and said, yeah, I fired him. I wouldn't be here today if I didn't fire Comey. Come on. He was going to Flynn. Come on.
Yeah.
So that could add. And then, of course, that would, make you'd have to start putting together that case if you weren't going to put it together before. But the meat on the bones, the stuff with McGahn, June, July, August. And that's, I think, at least where my eye is turned, that if we pass next summer without an indictment for obstruction of justice, then that to me says that obviously they aren't going to be able to do it unless there's one last tiny remote thing. And that is what is missing in the second half of that March 2019 Bill Barr memo that the Department of Justice refused to release, not for harm to an ongoing matter, but for deliberative process.
Right.
And that is the pardons. Are the pardons part of the obstruction conspiracy? And I think that they are, and a lot of great legal scholars, not just me, I'm an armchair lawyer, think that they could be as well. However, and that would obviously push the statute of limitations out into 2025. And if you don't indict by then, I mean,
well, and the other, in my view, the other impending time issue is the DOJ's longstanding policies made
election stuff, right?
Made public by Jim Comey, and put whatever asterisk what you want to do around that strongly counsel against indicting a candidate for public office in the midst of an election season. And all appearances right now that Trump will run and will be the Republican nominee in 2024. That is, it's a party that declined to issue a platform. They are so beholden to him. It was just Trump. And so I think, and look, God help me. I'm going to say this now because it needs to be said as a principle of law that in general, the principle of no matter which party is in the White House, no matter which party controls, appointed the attorney general and runs the executive branch, and no matter how serious the crimes are, the policy of we should not have a Department of Justice that indicts presidential candidates is a pretty good one, right? Like when you compare the United States track record to, lots of other, more fragile democracies, the we don't arrest your political opponents is a rule that deserves respect. Yeah.
Good rule.
Yeah.
It is a good rule.
I mean, that's why the original Michael Flynn lock her up shit was so horrifying, right?
Mhm.
Because that's not the kind of thing we do in this country. And I am super concerned as it drags on. It will be a fair argument for those on the right to say, really, you're gonna lock up Donald Trump in October of 2024 after he's the Republican nominee? I don't think so. And they'll have a good point. Not saying I would turn down a Trump indictment in October 2024, but I think it is important to point out that that's a bad road to go down.
Yeah, and that would, if we could, I'd like that to be the segue into our final discussion here of a little bit of a disturbing trend that I'm seeing, and it's mostly fringe. Mostly social media, but I've seen a lot of people on the quote unquote left who are demanding those kinds of banana republic arrests, those guilty until proven innocent arrests, the, hang them for treason. Where are the treason charges? Why, and it's disheartening to see a group of folks who would normally be against a cash bail system, who would normally be pro criminal defendant rights, pro constitutional rights, be willing to forego those because, well, it was an attack on our democracy. And I just find it hard to square that circle, that you would be willing to shit on democracy to save democracy. You can't really do that. Now, I agree. Could it be faster? Could it be more urgent? Could I hear more about a sense of urgency with regards to bringing people to justice? Sure. But to be willing to throw out our fundamental constitutional rights for the sake of speed or vengeance or quote unquote saving the republic, I think is a mistake.
I couldn't agree more with you. And we have been flagging this all the way back when, and I'm thinking about the report that dropped over the weekend that I think was a New York or the Week or what, I forget who did it, but it was like a piece on the rise and fall of Michael Avenatti, right? And I feel real good that our sources were among the very first sources on the left who were like, maybe you don't want to put all your eggs in the Michael Avenatti basket, right?
Mm-hmm.
We did a pretty in-depth research on his the activity that formed the basis of one of his criminal indictments. There was a time in which Michael Avenatti was floated as a presidential candidate. And there was a time in which Michael Avenatti and people like him were embraced by a segment of our voters. And I don't even know where they fall, right? I'm not going to say, left or whatever. I'm going to say people who said, I want somebody who can give it back to Trump the way Trump has been taking it out on us. And I understand that emotional frustration, but I just want to share your comments that, part of choosing sides and the battle lines being drawn is, having a thing worth fighting for at the conclusion of those lines being drawn, right? And I am proud, for example, I remain this. Oh, a hell of a lot of things I'm unhappy with the Democratic Party about. I am proud that we are the party that, when it comes to choose between more people voting and fewer people voting, picks more people voting, right? That's a fundamental principle that I can say that's something Democrats stand for, and you ought to be behind participation in the process. And I find it very worrisome when people want to trade outcomes for process. There's some things that I've changed my mind on, right? Like that's a version of the argument, right, against court packing, for example. And I said, look, like I still see all of the risks inherent in court packing that I articulated in 2017. It is just that it is so far broken that if we do not come up with radical change, we're not going to be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And so I'm willing to risk that loss of process and the fact that the Supreme Court will be a political football for the indefinite future, right? Like it will deliver a hammer blow to the Supreme Court. But I'm willing to take that now in a way that I wasn't willing to take in 2017, pre-Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. Mm-hmm. But I think we need to take a hard look at, how far are we willing to go to deliberately steal the Kraken phrase, to defend the Republic, and how much of the Republic are we prepared to lose in that defensive action? And I think not enough people are having that conversation.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. And man, yeah, you know what? It's been a year, Andrew, and this has been really great to talk to you about some of the highlights / lowlights of 2021.
Let's go out with a highlight. Tell me your favorite, because I know we've been focused on some of the negatives here, and I think that's good to hold ourselves accountable. That's the whole point of Clean Up on Aisle 45. But let's hit a handful of the highlights.
I think my favorite thing this year is the diversity and depth of the appointments of Joe Biden's cabinet and federal bench.
I'm mad at you for stealing mine, but it is look. It's why, and we think that you listeners are enjoying the comings and going segments. We get positive comments on it, but even if you hated it, I think I would still want to do it every week, because it has forced me to look at the commonalities in appointees way down the executive. Because like when I'm researching this stuff, like I got to go to the White House, / new notices / new arrivals, and, read up on the deputy undersecretary for, transportation. But one of the things that, the two of the things that we noticed in doing that are, number one, genuine commitment to real diversity up and down the executive branch and in judicial branch appointees, and without sacrificing quality and qualifications. And number two, genuine progressive ideological commitment, particularly at every branch of government that potentially intersects with the environment. I know I would love to see big legislative change, but we have a coal senator in Joe Manchin who is the major blockade on legislation coming through, and so the president can only act in an executive capacity. And to immediately rejoin the Paris Accords on day one of your administration, and more importantly, to back that up with appointment after appointment to staff out the executive branch of people who are who list as their top priority dealing with man-made climate change is part of what, right? It's all you could do if you were Liz Warren as president, if you were Bernie Sanders as president, right? All of the progressive choices that I wanted, I don't think could have delivered better infrastructure in terms of executive branch appointees, and Biden does not get enough credit for that.
Mm-mm. No, and also all of his legal governing by executive order along the lines of the EPA, and of course immigration changes in that, changing everything, banning chokeholds where he can, banning no-knock warrants where he can. I've been really impressed with, and I'd like to end my 2021 on what I'd like to see in
Ooh.
2022. And let's I'll just have a lightning round here. Obstruction of justice charges,
Yep.
Trump indictment for Manhattan DA, Trump
Yep.
indictment for the insurrection, leaders of the insurrection, some of those former DOJ officials. I want that New York Times headline like we got with Ehrlichman and et cetera. I'm looking forward to the public hearings for the January 6th committee. I want to pass the Build Back Better plan, and I would like for I would like Biden to finally get that Office of Legal Counsel memo that says he can cancel $50,000 of student debt for everybody in America.
I love all of that. I would add, I would like to see real Voting Rights Act reform.
Carve out that filibuster for voting rights.
Yep, absolutely. I would like to see, my hope is that the January 6th committee has learned its lessons from the Mueller report, right? And the largest lesson there, like I think you and I have said this, I think Bob Mueller instantly thought that the day that his report came out, that impeachment proceedings would proceed against the president the next day. Absolutely. It's clear from that. And what we saw was nobody reads a 400-page government report unless it's about oral sex. And so, Justin Amash left the Republican Party and left Congress and essentially had a T-shirt that was like, guys, have you read this thing? And the answer was no. Right. And it enabled Barr to, go out and lie to the American public and say, it says X and omit the word not in an ellipsis. And still 70% of the country doesn't know that he did that. Right. My solid friends and supporters on the left don't realize just how bad that misinformation was. So Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, you know what your party did. I'm really, really glad they're on the 1-6 committee, and hopefully they are providing some behind the scenes advice of, hey, let's make sure that this lands. Let's make sure that we don't just kind of assume through rose-colored glasses that people are going to do the right thing. Let's make this have teeth, and that I think would make a very, very happy 2022 and help us go on the right path.
And I think another great lesson, another huge lesson from the Mueller report is that if you have enough people obstructing and lying and pleading the fifth and giving false information, you may not have the evidence to be able to criminally indict. And what happened during the Mueller investigation behind closed doors with that obstruction is happening before our eyes right now with the January 6th committee. So it'll be interesting to see if with all this obstruction and they learned that the Trump clan learned, hey, if we just obstruct and keep our mouths shut, they won't find enough to criminally indict us. They know that that's their play, and also to sue for whatever they can possibly sue for. And so that's, again, reason enough for me to want a special counsel to get those declinations, because I'm afraid we could see, hey, we didn't have enough evidence to meet the criminal elements of these particular indictments because of lies, obstruction, et cetera. But, maybe they'd be able to get a bunch of people on the cover up. We'll see, but I hope 2022 is the year of accountability.
That will be my word of the year for 2022, accountability. And let's. I'm gonna go out glass half full, but let's see. So, well, advance happy holidays and happy New Year to you, Allison.
Yes, happy New Year as well. Happy New Year of accountability, and thanks to you for doing this show with me for the last 50 episodes, the last year. And again, thanks to our patrons who make this show possible. And thanks to everyone who listens, because we still have plenty to clean up.
We do indeed. And I want to go out. We owe our Hall of Famers one last thanks for 2021. So I'm going to read the whole list because I want to. So Jameel Chohan, Jessica Outbeer, Christopher Dalpy, dude, Lance Buckley, Crimer No Criming. Well, I've been drinking brake fluid, but I'm not addicted. I can stop whenever I want, which is a fantastic name. David in Brooklyn, Metacon 7, Charles Jones, January 20th, baby, Chris Waltrip, Patty B. Mitchell, and Chris Simpson. You are our Hall of Famers. You are our all-time greats. And 2021 would not have been possible without you. And we look forward to bringing you more great content in 2022. Well, with that, I've been Andrew Torrez.
I've been Allison Gill.
And this is Cleanup on Aisle 45. We'll see you in 2022.
Hi, I'm Harry Littman, host of Talking Feds, a roundtable that brings together prominent figures from government law and journalism for a dynamic discussion of the most important topics of the day. Each Monday, I'm joined by a slate of Feds favorites and new voices to break down the headlines and give the insider's view of what's going on in Washington and beyond. Plus sidebars explaining important legal concepts read by your favorite celebrities. Find Talking Feds wherever you get your podcasts.